So I thought, as a way to also to summarize the story, to do a process of elimination, okay, as to what could have happened with the body of Jesus. So let's start with the obvious, Joseph of Arimathea. Maybe he removed the body because he was given the body, right? It was his charge to prepare the body and put it in the tomb. Maybe Joseph of Arimathea did something with it. Scripture says that he was a pious man and therefore could not have removed the body on the Sabbath. Now, the Sabbath starts on Friday evening, as soon as the sun goes down. And so all this had to be done. You remember, right? They were trying to hurry to make sure all this was done before the Sabbath started. In other words, before the sun goes down. And so all of the disciples and so many other people that were around there would have watched Joseph in Arimathea as he placed the body in the tomb before sunset. And so if he did something, it would have had to have been after sunset, in which case he would have had to use torches. And if they had done that in the dark, it's a very tight city, very crowded city, they would have seen what was going on because he's kind of going around with torches. And so they would have been seen. So early Saturday morning, which is the next day, there would have already been Roman guards there. That brings another complication. But that brings us into the Roman guards. So maybe the Romans or the Jewish authorities did something about this. Maybe they're the ones who took the body. I need to remind you, first of all, that those were the Roman and the Jewish authorities were the ones who were the most motivated to keep his body there in the first place. It was, if for some reason, this is just a process of elimination that we're trying to do here, if for some reason they had removed it, they could have easily produced again this body because they knew where it was. They're the ones who did something with it. When the Christians started going around and saying, "He is risen, he is risen," they would have produced the body saying, "No, he isn't, here he is." But nobody did that because they didn't have a body, right? So that kind of does away with the Roman or the Jewish authorities. But what about the disciples? Maybe the disciples did something about the body, because they had a motive. At least they wanted Jesus to rise from the dead. The detailed account of Luke and Acts tells us that the disciples had fled the scene for fear of being caught, courageous men as they were. For them to have taken the body, we would have to believe that they were transformed from cowards to courageous men in a few weeks by what? By a deceptive plot, basically. A deceptive plot that enabled them to turn the known world upside down. Ultimately, you realize that every one of the disciples were martyred. And they would have been martyred for what they knew to be a false story. Of all of the options here in our little hypotheses, this is the worst. This is very, very unlikely that the disciples would have done something. As it was, the bodily resurrection of Christ was confirmed and preached by over 500 people, and no one who heard it was able to refute the details of the account of that story. Now, many people hated it, and many people were transformed by it, but no one was able to disprove the details of this story that Jesus had risen from the dead Sunday morning. So in the presence of his disciples and followers, Jesus proved himself to have flesh and bones and ate fish to prove that he was physically alive. He challenged those who doubted, such as Thomas, poor Thomas. He always gets pointed at, he's the doubter. But actually all of the disciples doubted. All of them, every one of them doubted. But he challenged those who doubted to look at his wounds. And he said in Luke Luke chapter 24. Look at my hands and my feet. It is I, myself. Touch me and see. A ghost does not have flesh and bones, as you see I have. John wrote later on of Christ, that which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our own eyes, which we have looked upon and touched with our hands. This life was made manifest. In other words, it was made real. It became reality. The only reasonable explanation for the missing body, the many appearances, the transformed disciples, the amazing origin and spread of Christianity is the bodily resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth from Joseph's tomb. This is what Peter preached on the day of Pentecost, Acts chapter 2. God has raised this Jesus to life, and we are all witnesses of it.